Yes, Zimbabwe is kicking. Yes, Zimbabwe is doing well. But look at the price you're paying for the capital that you're using today. It's mercenary interest rates. But there is a way to come out of mercenary regimes, and that's what I'm going to cover. Right. Generally, if you start engaging with DFIs, like your IMFs, your World Banks, they're not your friends, I can certainly tell you that. Because they also just want to make money like everybody else. But at least international investors like to be in a place where they have the comfort of the IMF. The IMF is a good blanket. If you see the IMF going in, then you say, oh, okay, things are good. That's what we do. You speak to any investor in London who lends to an emerging market country, they'll say, I want to look at the country balance sheet. And if that balance sheet is not good, I want to feel like there's an IMF program. Bang! And they all trade the same. Now I say they because I trained in agriculture. I'm a farmer, I didn't do economics or accounts. You guys are way smarter than me. But I'm saying the people you're dealing with, they've been trained a particular way. Speak their language, right? So engage. Now, the point I'm making here is when you then look at countries such as Kenya, Rwanda, etc., we look at their financing sources and we're happy to lend to them because we've got the comfort that at least big capital is behind them. Patient capital is behind them. So all I'm saying as a message to Honorable Sir is engagement with international players, with international organizations. Look, I have many people who are not my friends that I speak to. And sometimes I even have coffee with them. If you're running a country, not everyone's going to be a friend, eh? But just engage. Engage, right? Because if you engage, then there are fools like me who sit in credit committees who say, IMF is there, we're going to lend. And that's it, right? Now, final thing is, I just want to run you through some of the transactions we've done. So here, the theme is, the world is not just any longer lending, just purely saying, I want some money, and then they just give you money, right? Now there are some, you can borrow with certain programs, so to speak. Now I'm just going to run you through some of the things that I have been involved in, and I think Zimbabwe can particularly engage in. There's something called debt for nature swaps. Basically, you're lent some money that you can use on other things, on the proviso that you can look after your forests, your lakes, and everything else. Now, if I say to you, guys, I'm going to give you 200 million on the basis that you don't pollute the Kariba Dam, would you resist that? Right? We're doing that. There's also debt for development. Money comes in, but it's linked to specific projects like healthcare, etc., etc. Social impact financing. We've done some deals with Chile and Mali, but we're building homes, affordable homes for the population. And these are projects that are ring-fenced. So you go Kukadoma, Chekutu, Kwekwe, you build, 5,000 cluster, it's ring-fenced, and that money pays into the project. These are simple things that we can do as Zimbabweans, right? We also, I was involved in the restructuring that happened for Zambia recently in Ghana. And one of the things that we did was macro-linked bonds to say, well, we're going to lend you, but we are going to have KPIs on growth. If you fail, there are penalties. But if you pass, great. You pay lower interest rates, right? These are all things that Zimbabwe can do. Now, I'm not here to try to say, no. I'm just saying, guys, I live on the inside, right? And I've just come to tell you what I see on the inside. And this is what we're doing on the inside. Right, and then the final thing is, can Zimbabwe return to capital markets? Hell yeah. Hell yeah. I've missed a French word there, but hell yeah. Hell yeah. Right, you guys know the great country of Israel. In the 60s and 70s and 80s, Israel had to launch its currency 3-4 times because it was struggling with inflation, etc., etc. You look at Israel today, Bob's your uncle, right? You have to have hope that if you do things the right way, the results will come. You have to have patience, right? So I do believe when I look at Zimbabwe, to me it's like, Zimbabwe can do it tomorrow. You just need to dial up on certain things. And these are not things that are political. These are not things that will cost anyone. These are just the right things to do if you want if you want a country to be a well-functioning machine, right? So I know, based on the countries that I look at, which are way lower than Zimbabwe, where there's people aren't as smart as you guys. Like, do you guys know where Benin is?
Yes.
Do you know what Benin exports? Soybean. And do you know how much we lent them recently? Go look it up. It's not millions, it's billions. Now, we're lending to soybean exporters billions. What about gold producers? What about chrome producers? What about diamond producers, right? Now, someone has to finish because time is not limitless. I'm saying to you guys who are the future, because I'm no longer the future, I lost my hair in the process. If you want to run a country for the future, control inflation. That's the first thing, right? And if you control inflation, you gain our trust. And if you gain our trust, money comes in. And if money comes in good amounts, the price of money goes down. And if the price of money, if the price of borrowing for the sovereign goes down, then all of you guys who've got your businesses that you want to borrow, your interest rate will follow down as well. And then if we do that, we're building a prosperous Zimbabwe. Now, this is where I'm going to stop, and I hope that was worthwhile.
Thank you, Mr. Mangwiro. You drive 92 kilometers from Chivu, from going east, you get to Boyera. I'm Siama from Boyera. Give me $2 million. So colleagues, that was an informative session. I'm sure we have a lot of points that we picked and ticked. Like all the presenters today, they've assured me that they are there for the day. So you've got an opportunity to meet them at lunch. At least now managed to confirm we're not going to be walking for 15 minutes. We are going to be going downstairs. So there's enough time for us to ask our questions. Welcome, Minister. All protocols observed, and feel free. So next is a panel discussion. The panel is titled Zimbabwe Investment Landscape Policy and Regulation. I think it would dovetail nicely into what Mr. Mangwiro was sharing with us earlier. Leading this panel is Mr. Fred Konoeshuro, who I'll invite to start making his way to the podium. Now, Fred has got a list of panelists that will assist us in guiding a conversation that covers everything from frameworks, financial flows, deal making, and making sure that the landscape for our country, or getting a conversation around the landscape of our country, the policy and the regulation supports what Mr. Mangwiro will be able to do for us should we give him the right indicator. So I'll hand over to Fred to call upon his panel and to lead us in the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Chair. All protocols observed. Thank you very much. I've got an experienced panel here, as our MC has just said. So first of all, I'll call Tim Morris. Thank you, Tim. Of course, Gordon Zabiri, Tapa Investment. I think Mr. Mudenge, Takura, I think we are calling you back to the panel. Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. So I'll introduce myself first. Because of time, I was going to ask each panelist to introduce themselves, but I think they will introduce themselves when they are addressing questions initially, so because of time. So my name is Fred Mukono-Ishuro. I'm the odd one out here. So I'm an engineer by profession, but there's a reason why I was invited. He talked about partnerships today. For our country to develop, we need accountants, we need engineers. I've been working in London for the last 25 years, based in London. I work for over 20 partners. I lead our water business in London. So water and engineering is my passion, but I'm also involved in major projects. And the stuff you're talking about, infrastructure development, is of interest to me. So we'll go through a couple of questions. I'll open up to the floor, but at the end of it, we'll conclude. I think we've been told our time is limited. So Tim, I'll come to you first. You introduce yourself quickly, but I just wanted to pose a question. If that's not working, I'll give you mine. But I just wanted to pose a question to you to set it off. There's a lot of optimism about Africa, or especially Zimbabwe, investment landscape. Whilst this is warranted, what are some of the challenges and systematic risks that you could derail this?
Thank you. Is that working? I'm Tim Morris. I was a diplomat for 37 years, which is probably takes me back to before some of you were born. I was always involved with Africa and with Zimbabwe too, through work and through my own heart as well. I visited there first many years ago in difficult times, though it's always difficult times. I had my last 10 years of my career as ambassador in various other African countries up in further north, in Morocco, Mauritania, Congo, and South Sudan. I left the diplomatic service 7 years ago after doing a job where I was working on promoting investment in Africa. And previously I had run the UK program in Japan, encouraging Japanese investment here in the UK. And I would argue that any country attracting investment into its own country is basically going through the same challenges. It's very easy to be too, and in reply to the question you put to me, Fred, I think too specific. While I 100% agree with Brian's presentation, and I thought it was brilliantly put across, and it was a frontal reminder that investors need the numbers to be right. They need to be able to make money, they need certainty. There are other things as well. And it's a long list, which I won't go through, and it differs according to companies, and it differs according to countries. But I think to zero in on Zimbabwe, I would see an immense excitement, and I think this room today demonstrates a really key point, that you have a battalion of brilliant people who come from, many come from this country, but who come from a well-educated country in Africa, which is distinguished by its education and by its thought leadership across the continent, and it should be emphasized again and again that that is the case. There are Zimbabwean leaders everywhere in business across Africa and outside Africa as well, and in this country as well. And that's a huge strength. And when that is fully leveraged, that is a very positive message for the future. I also fundamentally believe in Africa as a continent, with all its complexities, that because of demographic change, because of the surge of brilliant young people, that it's an investment story waiting to happen, and there will be a feeding frenzy by the sharks who will all rush in at the right moment. It's not quite yet there, but it will happen, and you will have to manage that process, and that's a very exciting and difficult, but exciting process. I think with Zimbabwe you have that terrific asset. You have some obvious challenges at the moment in terms of the economy. In broader terms, though, I think looking at investment generally, I would also put the numbers at the top. In other words, an investor needs to know that they're going to make money, they're going to be secure in making money, and security is around a feel about long-term policies, support from the government, and other obvious things. There are a number of challenges, I think, other than that. One is a challenge faced throughout Africa, which is a question of scale. Now, there are sectors, and mining is a very interesting one, where you can pick on an individual mine, and the Honourable Minister is here now, who obviously knows this much better than I could ever express, and you can make money from that mine. But in investment generally, the global investor, the outside investor, wants to look at a scale. To give you an example, when I was running the program in Japan, and we were very successful, the UK was the most successful European country in bringing Japanese investment to Europe. We got 50% of it regularly. Every single project was based on the idea of re-exporting to Europe. So not a single project from Japan came just to look at the UK market. And it's the same in Africa. We see a number of countries, some of them big, some of them very small. In global terms, none of them very big and not particularly connected. And this is why the free trade area is so important. And we can't just magically make that happen, but I personally believe it will happen, and it'll be driven by key sectors which will insist. Sectors like fintech, sectors like the energy transition, air services and others. They will pull the continent along. That's good news, because then an investment in Africa comes into context, because people could see that investing in Zimbabwe involves access to the wider region, not the whole continent. So there are challenges there, but I'm immensely enthusiastic and, as always, incredibly impressed by the feel there is about a Zimbabwean audience. It is different. We're all different, but you are different. And it's a very, very positive future your country has.
Thank you, Tim. Thank you very much for that. Yes. Building on that, I'll come to you, Paul, because what Tim has said just flows nicely to yourself, Paul. And something that Brian is raised around a multilateral organization that you work for, and when they're there, in their role in the investment climates. But if you can expand on that and also expand on deal flows as well, that would be good. So introduce yourself.
Thank you very much, Fred. Yeah, I'm Paul Lewis. I've worked in international economic development for about 35 years. I used to be at the sharp end of that. I was chief executive of a trade and investment agency in Scotland for many years. And for the last 5 years, I've worked for the World Bank Group. I work in the advisory services in East and Southern Africa, and a particular focus on Zimbabwe. So, Brian, I hope I am a friend of Zimbabwe, despite my organisation's reputation in other areas. So, yeah, that's my background and who I am. In terms of the kind of questions you asked about investment and investment flows, I think it's really important for any country to both understand the kind of investment it wants to attract, but also to understand what's happening out in global markets, so that you can actually successfully fish in the rivers where there are fish to catch. And so on that, let me just give you a couple of things about what's happening from our perspective globally in terms of foreign direct investment flows. Excuse me. So I would say it's a dynamic market at the moment, and not necessarily a good way. We've seen global investment flows decline 11% in 2024. That's the second consecutive year they've declined. So the value of investment that's being shipped internationally is declining, and therefore countries need to be really competitive in how they attract that investment. So it's a declining overall picture. However, it's an uneven picture, I would say, and there are certain sectors and certain places that are doing remarkably well. So two sectors particularly I would mention that are really very, very strong in terms of global international flows. One, the digital economy, and that covers telecoms, digital services, and the like. That increased 100% last year, 100%. So it's a very, very vibrant market. And the second is the green economy, and particularly renewables, which has become one of the largest sectors for global investment over the last few years, really from quite a low base to quite a high base quite quickly. Now, in both of those, I think Zimbabwe is incredibly well positioned, both in terms of its demand for energy and its resources in terms of the renewable space, but also having a group of highly educated, bright young people who are tech savvy, which is critical for the digital services. So it is an uneven picture. Interestingly, Brian mentioned the inflation question in Uganda. When you look at those flows internationally, 11% down overall. Africa, up 75%. Up 75% against that backdrop. So Africa's doing something right as a continent. Within that, there are certain places doing very well, Egypt, Ethiopia. But Uganda is now in the top 5 investment locations in the whole continent of Africa. So there are things that can be done that can really transform the position of countries. The final thing I'd say on investment flows is there are certain sectors, certain places that really matter. But given that market, all countries will need to compete really effectively. And to do that, I think you need to have a very clear strategy. I think you need to have very strong senior government support for that strategy. And also, you need to have agencies like ZEDA, because in order to attract investment, you need an agency that's out there looking for, engaging with, and convincing investors that they should come to your country. And I would really commend the work ZEDA does in that regard.
I'll bring it closer to home because we were talking about inward investments. I'll come to you, Ngoni. What role, I know you work for Mutapa, you probably give you an introduction. So what role does Mutapa Investment is playing? It's a critical role in the investment climate and landscape in Zimbabwe. If you can expand, perhaps maybe touching some of the sectors or the infrastructure.
Thank you very much, Fred. Am I audible? Yeah. So, my name is Ngoni Zabin. I'm a member of the Institute of Chartered Accountants, so one of you. Long-standing member of council, and I think I'm attending my 6th winter school. And I never actually expected to be sitting up here talking to my fellow members. In fact, up until 2-3 days ago, my name wasn't on the program. So be kind to me. I think, so what I understand is one of my colleagues, our chief investment officer, was due to make a presentation but was not able to make it. So I am certainly standing in. Now, Mutapa Investment Fund, Sovereign Wealth Fund of Zimbabwe. In terms of operations, we are barely 2 years in. In fact, we're actually going through an audit, an external audit of our financial statements for our first year. So hopefully you'll be able to see an annual report pretty soon. Yes, we are audited. and as you can imagine, it involves a lot of things. So as the fund was set up, basically we used the Boston Consulting Group matrix to analyze our portfolio companies, of which there are probably just over 30, but if you include the groups, there's about 66 companies. Some of them are represented here. We do have members, I can see AFC, Net1, I think Coimbra Group is here, and we do have an investment in CBZ, so I'm quite pleased and proud that we have our members here, and we'd like to see a lot more of them, whether sitting as CFOs, CEOs, or even taking up board positions. And there may be others that I have not seen. So I think, as I said, we've used the Boston Consulting Group matrix to analyze our portfolio companies. And basically, we've stratified them into different areas. You know, you've got your cash cows, your question marks, your stars, and your dogs. Now, if I start off with the dogs, I mean, a lot of people say, well, why don't you just shoot the dogs, right? But we do have SPCA that can look after the dogs. And so the way we're structured, though, unlike a lot of other sovereign wealth funds, so if you look at Norway, for example, we've probably got the biggest sovereign wealth fund in the world, and they look after trillions of dollars. Our focus at the moment is turning around some of these state-owned entities that fall under us. And in so doing, that means we need to leverage off maybe our cash cows to help turn around these entities so that they can declare a dividend to the fund, and we in turn contribute positively to the fiscus. And we don't do that alone. We certainly have to work with a lot of government institutions. Cabinet is always well abreast of what we're doing. I mean, ZEDA is a key partner in terms of investment coming into the country. And as well as, and I'm quite pleased that we have somebody from the World Bank Group here, because, I mean, I don't know how many meetings I've had with people from the World Bank in our offices, sometimes asking us the same questions. But having said that, even though we haven't got any money per se from the World Bank, they are providing some technical support in terms of how we want to monitor, because we do have a role to monitor these entities, building a dashboard so that we have access to their information in real time. We do foresee ourselves using some of the AI co-pilot as well in terms of our data analytics. We're aiming to be as slick and as savvy as possible. So I mean, there's certainly a lot of work that needs to be done, and what's critical to bring in investment are certain things like our governance structures. So one of the things we did see with a lot of entities is there was need to strengthen governance in terms of the strength of the board, the strength and the skills of executive management. And that is underway. You will see a lot of board appointments a lot of changes have been made, and that's critical. The other critical area is the area around sustainability. We do know that there is some funding that we can leverage off, but all our entities need to focus on sustainability. We've got entities in various sectors, particularly mining, which in some cases, things like coal mining is said is a dirty word in some economies, but we're looking at a net zero in terms of our carbon emissions. But that's also certainly work in progress. And then in terms of their contribution to the economy, we did institute a study by Zimstat. In terms of value add, for the last year, you'll be shocked to hear that Mutapa companies have contributed far less than 10% to the economy, to the GDP of Zimbabwe, which is just not good enough. We do have a target of Vision 2030 to contribute as much as 20% by then, and certainly our work is cut out. So our sources of funding, we have to go out and raise money. So a lot of the skill sets that we employ are corporate finance type people. We have managed to raise some funding where we have and disperse some of the funding to a lot of our portfolio companies. But as mentioned earlier, the cost of that funding is punitive, to say the least. So, look, I think we need to get to a stage where we can get funding at competitive levels, because otherwise we just keep bleeding our companies. So I think, there's a lot more that we could talk about in terms of infrastructure. I think the last point I'm going to make, we do have our areas of priority, which will be of interest to members. ZESA is something that we are seized with. I won't say too much about that, because there is a transaction that is with Cabinet at the moment for approval around rebundling of ZESA to create more efficiency, as well as investment into that, into the group. NRZ, one would say that NRZ is a dog, but for me, it should become a cash cow. We need rail infrastructure. There's a lot of stuff happening behind the scenes around rail infrastructure. So, look, I think I'm around. We can talk in detail. Otherwise, I could probably talk the whole day about our portfolio. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Ngoni. Audience, we have an opportunity. I'm being reminded of time, but I just wanted to come to Takula. So one of the things I failed to mention today, why am I here? So I am the Zimbabwe Institute of Engineers UK and Europe branch chair. So I represent over 200 or more than that engineers in the UK and Europe. And we always, in our discussions, we always want to find ourselves having a play in the development of our country and contributing significantly. So my question to you, Sakura, I'm just going to be focusing on infrastructure, because I've seen excellent case studies. I like case studies, I like building stuff. Your focus on infrastructure development has been commendable. And you mentioned a lot about partnership, which we are all here for. And I work with a lot of you colleagues in corporate finance, in structural deals, but for myself, from a technical point of view. So where do we come in? Where does technical support, leverage, you can encourage us to get involved in some of the projects that Old Mutual group of companies are doing?
Yes, so, yeah, all right. So my name is Takuram Debuni. You may have heard before. MC, I'm also a Mofumzama from Goye. So you are my kinsman. So turning to the question, we are not engineers. We are not necessarily running the kind of operation that is looking to actively manage some of these projects. Where we come in is as a financier, and a key part of that is our capital markets. We are a capital market player, and the speakers before me have mentioned the issue of foreign investment. But foreign investment needs to work together in a complementary manner with domestic investment. And we see our role as a mobilizer of domestic investments. Generally, when you typically hear people talk about Zimbabwe's economy, you'll hear people talking about agriculture as the key sector of the economy, mining as a key sector of the economy, tourism as a key sector of the economy. We would like to make the case that financial services is a key sector of the economy for reasons not just of value addition in its own right, but because of the role it plays in mobilizing funding for things like the key infrastructure projects that you mentioned. And I think one has to say that in as much as, you know, we tend to be consumed by certain narratives about Zimbabwe, but a lot has been done over the last 5 to 10 years around making it easier to mobilize funding. We must commend the government. There is still a lot of work to do, but we must commend the government in terms of some of the initiatives that they have been behind to support the capital markets industry. The establishment of the VFX, for example, is a key one. We are increasingly seeing the financial services regulator, SEC, being very much amenable to working with players such as ourselves in coming up with innovative products to capture funding for purpose of directing to infrastructure. We have been discussing infrastructure funds. We have been discussing real estate investment trusts, and there are a number that have been launched in recent times. And, you know, often visitors to Zimbabwe will talk about how much evidence of activity they see. People will say, you know, you guys are always complaining, but we are seeing money here. I think there's a link that has been broken that probably needs to be mended, in that we must develop the capacity to mobilize a lot of this wealth that seems to be apparent. We need to mobilize it more away from consumptive type economic activity and more into investment type. And that is our task as the financial services sector, working with our regulators in capital markets, in the Ministry of Finance. I'm seeing one of our regulators, the CEO of the ZSC here, you know, and I'd like to acknowledge it. It's very critical for us to develop the capital markets as a sector in its own right, because in order to exploit the opportunities that we see in mining, agriculture, tourism, you need a healthy, vibrant capital markets and financial services sector. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So because of time, I'll open up to the floor, just 1 or 2 questions, if you allow me. Two questions. I've been told only 2 questions. So if you say your name, if I call you, I'll ask the MC to help me pick 2 people. So if you say your name, your organization, and the question, please direct it to one of the panelists in the
Okay, thank you. My question is to Takura.
Yeah, what's your name, sorry?
Gerald Matata is my name. My question is to Takura. So I think, you know, I've heard a lot of what you've obviously presented for Old Mutual, and I was in Zimbabwe last couple of weeks. I had one question: what is it I could invest in as someone who's based in the UK? And is it secure? And will I be able to access my US dollars if I invest in Zimbabwe? So I did actually visit Old Mutual quite interestingly, and you know, asked about fixed income investment. But since you're here, yeah, I imagine you can share, you know, a lot of what we do in investing in Zimbabwe, because you know, I imagine that's a question that's probably, you know, in the minds of many people in this audience. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm just a humble accountant. I don't know why they invited me here. No, but seriously, to your question, is your investment secure? I think there is a broader question around the macroeconomics, which we must acknowledge. and it talks to the presentation that Dr. Mangiro gave earlier, to say there are certain fundamentals that are required. Yes, yes, yeah.
And my question is, do you have actual experience where people have actually invested money and to be able to repay is actually quite easy? Because that's probably the main concern, particularly because there's a lot of money which are still people can actually benefit from the very generous interest in Zimbabwe.
Yes.
But the concern is always US dollars, but can I actually get it back? My question is rather
Yes.
basically
Yes, all right, okay. So we're in a multi-currency environment.
yes.
And our experience is anyone who brings in US dollars can take out US dollars. We ourselves, as a business, have been able to pay dividends to our shareholders and repatriate. So yes, yes, yes. So it is possible, but
So he is available today, so we might so I will take the last question. So if you can say your name, your organization, and your question directed to one of the panelists. Please go ahead.
Okay, thank you. My name is Hazel Nyamuba, and I'm in the insurance sector. So my question is to Tim, possibly because he spoke about Africa free trade. So my question is, we're pushing the agenda for Africa free trade, but at the same time, we've seen regulators closing their borders to encourage employment within their countries and promote their citizens. So there seems to be fragmented regulation across Africa, possibly because of the disparity within the different economies. So it seems there's a tangent, there's a disconnect between what the African free trade agenda is pushing and what regulators are pushing in country. So in your opinion, how do you think the balance can be struck so that we move in the same direction as a continent?
Thank you, and you're absolutely right to say this is difficult, and sector by sector there are particular problems. Your sector, the insurance sector, is an extremely exciting one, and it really epitomizes, I think, progress when that market can take off and take off across borders. Other blocks, European Union, for example, took many years to get over these problems, and there were always, and arguably there still are, remaining problems on fish or whatever the particular issue is, where you have very entrenched interests, and it's really difficult. But I would simply say, don't expect it all to be completed quickly, but making a start can be dramatically successful. So I picked out 3 sectors where it seems to me that there's a logic which goes across the continent. Fintech is one of them, which is sort of almost by definition a trans-border exercise, which governments won't be able to control, actually. The energy transition in its wider sense, where Zimbabwe has a very strong position on renewables, other countries got a very strong position on production. And there is a really interesting and powerful case to be made by the continent to set a continental-wide framework, not to oblige everyone to do the same thing, but to set a strategic framework which can then increase the voice of Africa in the various COP debates, where that voice is being lost, for example. I mentioned air services, that's another one, which is already happening. So I think it's a lifetime work. We could be having this conversation, I think, many years hence. But what I hope and pray for is that there will be certain flagship sectors where real progress has been made. And I would hope that insurance and financial services would be up there to the fore, because they do lend themselves to trans-border cooperation. And from an investor's point of view, it's obvious. that you don't want to go into one country just to service its market. You want to be hubbing and spoking across the continent. So I'm hopeful, but that's not to disguise some real challenges.
One quick thing on that, just to say there is some really interesting data, I will share it through the organisers, on policies being introduced by governments that are either beneficial or negative. And you're right, some countries are putting up barriers to investment flows. However, the data suggests that the majority of policies being introduced are enabling policies that are encouraging greater flow of investment between countries. And you're right, if the free trade agreement is going to reach its potential, then more of that is beneficial. But I'll share that data because it sort of gives some hope, despite some of the things some countries are doing.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you very much. Yes, I think our time is up. I just want to thank our panelists. Can you give them a round of applause, please?
Thank you. If I can ask our JVP to present tokens of appreciation to our panelists. Another round of applause for our panelists. And thank you, Madam. Right, so next we have a presentation, again from one of our sponsors, but most importantly an institution that is instrumental in moving the investment agenda for our country. Just again to mention the rest of the sponsors, our platinum sponsors, Old Mutual, EcoCash, Afrexim Bank. Then we also have CBZ, FBC, ZB Holdings, Clear Mobitel, Remit Hope, Diaspora Insurance, Southern African Times, and Sporting Shed Events. So as I mentioned, this next presentation brings us